How's it going, you guys? Somewhere Out There podcast, episode 10. This next episode is going to be very, very special. We got somebody on that we here at the podcast was a shot in the dark. It was a very obscure idea to even, to get somebody of altitude as this person we were going to introduce for this episode. It's just it's like the song of Rolling Stones, pleased to meet you, hope you guess my name. It was that type of guy. This guy we got on for this episode. He's part of the rock and roll community. He is rock and roll. He is rock and roll royalty. He's part of rock and roll royalty with rock and roll. Yeah, this guy that we had on was just amazing. He was very open, and he was very not shy about what his intentions were with his answers and stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, we had Mr. Jesse Hughes on this next episode, lead singer for the Eagles of Death Metal. He is part of the whole Joshua Tree phenomenon going on down there. He's part of that whole crew. Rancho de Luna. He's part of that whole scene. He's a member. He's one of them. So having him on was very, very awesome. He was the nicest person ever. And let me get to it. Imagine. Right now I feel like Incredible Boy when he's trying to get into contact with Mr. Incredible. For real.
That's fucking hilarious. You made my day with that.
You're obviously Mr. Incredible, so. But yeah. So you're about to tattoo yourself right now?
No, I'm gonna tattoo Amanda first. Fuck no, I'm not gonna tattoo myself.
Mr. Hughes, you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. I got all two of you guys online.
Wow.
All right.
Do you have like a rad phone? I want to get a phone system so that someone can call into my actual phone line, but I can run it into my board so that I can hear the phone call. Like, people, if they were listening, they can hear the phone call overhead, but we would have one microphone. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's got to be a device that you can do.
Absolutely, yeah. I have to look into it. I imagine there's something out there like at Sam Ash or something.
Please have your brother look into it, and then let's reconnoiter.
Absolutely. He's tattooing as of right now, John.
Oh, cool! Right now.
All right. So, do you go by is there Mr. Hughes, or how do you go by good sir?
I wanted to say so bad, Mr. Hughes is my father, but he would fucking hate that too. So, Moose, you can call me Moose. Moose Select, you can call me Mr. Fabulous. That would be great, but
Got you.
fucking Moose.
Cool. It's just like right now, just like we're not worthy, that type of moment. But it's all good. It sounds.
I look at it like we're all rock and rollers, we all love this thing called rock and roll, and that can mean a lot of things. Public Enemy is just as much rock and roll as anything else, NWA is just as much rock and roll, but my point is this, we're all rock and rollers. I'm just the monkey that gets to shake his dick on stage, but we all do something. You know what I mean? We all have some hand in the cog.
Hey, that's sick, man. Yeah, we'll just let us introduce ourselves. I appreciate you taking the call. I'm Jonathan. We're actually brothers. My name's Jonathan Weaver, and we're part of the Somewhere Out There podcast. Thank you for taking some time to talk with us for a little bit. And I'll hand it off to my brother. He's the one that's really been spearheading this podcast and getting it going. But I'll let him introduce himself, and we'll get this going.
Awesome, dude. I love it.
Yeah, I'm James. Somewhere Out There podcast. Just as my hetero life mate just said. Yeah, we are right out of San Antonio, Texas. I was watching your live stream. You had a friend of yours that was also from San Antonio, and I was like, oh, cool. So it's like, so it's like kind of a little connection, but it's all good.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in Texas. One of my nicknames is Stan Antonio because I love San Antonio so much. That's no joke. Whenever I come to San Antonio, the kids will yell, Stan Antonio! Like, it's kind of, it's one of my favorite things. I love these nicknames that I get. But San Antonio is up there, dude. And I bought some of my favorite things there. And, of course, anywhere where they have a sunken, like, mall, lake scenario where, you know, people go to shop and look at water is kind of rad.
Appreciate that.
And doesn't it also have the Aztec Theater?
Yes, we do. You played there.
The sister theater of the Aztec is called the Mayan, and it's in LA. They were both built at the same time. They were built to be the brother and sister of one another. And the Aztec is fucking haunted. And I was actually, the last time we played there with Mastodon, I fucking experienced the haunting. And literally, never in my life did I ever believe in that shit until after San Antonio, dude.
Oh.
Really? Can you tell us a little bit about that? What is... Okay, so I got there, and, you know, I'm always very friendly. I always get to know, whenever I get to a venue, it doesn't matter where I am, I'm always the first one who's going to be like, hi, I'm Jesse, what's your name? What do you do here? That kind of shit. Good as you want, later. So, they told me that one of the former owners, the dude that was nicknamed Bones, they called him, he was skinny, and that he haunted the place, and that he would occasionally, you know, like, take the time to kind of, like, let you know that, he was there, and I was like, whatever, and I'm thinking bullshit. So, my friend Eric and I had just bought a couple of airsoft guns, and we were setting them up in my dressing room. Our door was wide open, and the bathroom in the dressing room, the door was open, and the way it was situated, Eric and I were basically looking directly in the direction of the toilet. And they had told us that sometimes he likes to flush toilets, and I was like, sure. And so right in the middle of this, I made some comments. We had just come in, we were starting to set up the airsoft guns, and I'm like, dude, you think it almost looked like they bought that fucking ghost story bullshit. And as soon as I said that, I could hear the toilet handle jiggle, and Eric and I both looked up, and the toilet handle dropped, and the toilet flushed.
Oh, shit.
And I looked at Eric, and I'm like, what the fuck? And I was like, okay, this has got to be some joke. It's got to be a setup. We walked over there. We both have, like, a history in construction and shit, and plumbing. We pulled that fucking toilet literally almost apart. I was so cool, I was about to drain it. But it was just a regular simple handle system. It was a regular simple plunger system. So we put it back together, and we were both standing over the toilet. Like, imagine, like, two dudes, like, it would almost look like we were pushing in the toilet at the same time, but we were just standing there looking at it. And right as soon as Eric goes, well, I'd like to see that happen again. I shit you not, with God as my witness, that fucking toilet flushed. And this isn't like something with our back turned. We're both staring at it, and the toilet flushed. And I went, what the fuck? So I started to walk out of the dressing room, and they had an old intercom system, like from the 50s there, with these speakers playing, but it clearly, some of the wires were rotted away. You could tell it didn't work. As soon as Eric and I got to the door, the intercom system started to go. Oh, shit. And I was like, get the fuck! And so I started calling for the house manager. Her name was Sally, and I'm like, now, get the fuck over here, what the fuck? Right as soon as we both stepped outside of our dressing room, this old-ass dressing room door shut, and it's heavy, dude, and it locked, and it was the bolt lock. And when I say bolt lock, not like a modern Schlager bolt lock, like a 1950s era fucking deadbolt with the interchangeable fucking penny system. Not like something that would just be readily affected by gravitational forces is what I'm trying to say. And it locked. And they had to send a runner up to the fire escape to go into the window to unlock the door. And the static only in the speakers in our room continued until I apologized to Mr. Bond and told him that I would respect his theater and that I apologized for insulting him. And as soon as I said that, the whole speaker system went and then went silent. Then if that's what happened, That's what I saw. I don't have any explanation for it, but and this ain't some like even like fire in the sky has less of an interaction than that.
Wow. That's so.
Yeah, that's wild, man.
And that was in San Antonio, dude.
Nice. Only in San Antonio.
And I believe that rock and roll is a powerful thing. Performance is a ritualistic and powerful thing, however you want to cut it. You're asking a bunch of people to gather in front of you. You sing songs to them, some of which they know and sing along with you. And you normally are worshiping at the altar of a common cause, whatever it is. You know, if it's the Beastie Boys, it's a certain type of hip-hop. If it's NWA, it's a certain. If it's the Ramones, it's a certain type of punk rock. If it's the Misfits, if it's the Smiths, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of very religious. And it imbibes a certain power and invests things into it. And sometimes you bring things, when theaters host multiple artists, the possibility for multiple demon possession has got to be high.
Absolutely.
That's wild. And let me ask you that, man. So based on that, because have you always had that kind of insight or that understanding of that kind of that, like you mentioned, that ritualistic type of energy that you get from performing with people and fans that follow the music and that are passionate about hearing you guys. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that developed, like how that culture, how you see that developing over your experience in the industry, and how that kind of drives you, or does that drive you? Or
well, I mean, let's be frank and let's be clear. It was the modus operandi and the primary motivating apparatus that drives the whole motherfucking shooting match since Jump Street. And we can argue about the technical beginning of rock and roll. We can say it's when Hank Williams, but really let's just call it's Elvis and Little Richard, and then to a lesser extent Chuck Berry. But for the most part, that's when rock and roll started. And from Jump Street, it was about driving a concept of a cult. It's a cult of personality, and I mean that's what it is. And sometimes you can have an artist who will be successful, but it turns out that they have no substance, like Milli Vanilli. It didn't stop in any respect the cult from being driven. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And either you recognize it or you don't recognize it. You don't think you bear responsibility, or you do believe you bear responsibility. Ultimately, it's going to happen, and it's going to be the force by which the money is made. You know.
Yeah, you hit a point right now, like getting a following, garnering a cult. The whole the whole Joshua Tree phenomenon. Can you explain that to me? Because you're part of that crew with like Rancho de la Luna, your homeboy Josh Homme. I mean, I'm drawn to it. I mean, out in the desert, I dig the whole thing. Like Paul Gray said from Slipknot about Iowa, it's like it's an Iowa thing. That's how they got their sound. Do you feel the same way about Joshua Tree? I mean, in respect to the...
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's Joshua Tree, which has a more universal history, and which I'm glad to be a part of. And then there's the desert sound, which is unique and specific to our generation of artists. And always, you're going to see musical scenes explode from a city, and you'll see the personalities and the inherent, traits and the things that make it identifiable are unique to that city. Seattle, we had the grunge explosion, and that essentially was Black Sabbath and the Beatles from an even dirtier garage's perspective, and it was unique to Seattle. But then you had the Olympia, Washington aspect of it, and that was Decay Records and the more Bikini Kill. And then then you have the San Francisco scene, which would be like the Dead Kennedys came out of there. That was something that's uniquely Bay Area. Green Day, the Lookout Records, South or East Bay was unique. It's a unique sound. Southern California, going back to the 60s, there's the Southern California Laurel Canyon cowboy scene. The environment with which you're surrounded is going to affect you, obviously, to an incredible degree. Whatever you're seeing every day is going to come out of you. So inherently, there's something beautiful and majestic to Joshua Tree, and there's also something interestingly convenient. Everyone that's in Hollywood pursuing the music business, when they want to go 2 hours away, which is about the maximum that people will drive when it comes to a one-day getaway, the maximum is about 2 hours, 3 hours at the most, happens to be Joshua Tree. And it happens to be a place where you can do things where nobody's watching. And there's the ability to see the Milky Way at night, and the sunrises are spectacular. It's also a phenomenally eccentric place because you can be in 115-degree heat on the one hand because you're in the desert, and then on the other hand, you can be snowed in, a snowstorm like Joshua and I were after we played at Pappy and Harry's 10 years ago. We were snowed in. I mean, and when you drive into Joshua Tree, every 200 yards for approximately 3 miles, there's a unique flora and fauna that only exists in that 200 yards and only on that spot on Earth. And it's the only place on Earth where that happens. So it's the place of anomalies and of treasures. And that's got its own appeal. That would be like the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones throw brown sugar in Joshua Tree. Ry Cooder took them out there in the middle of the desert where they could experiment with drugs. Graham Parsons wrote some of his greatest songs. U2 even has a connection to it. Then there's the desert scene, which is the low desert, the Saharan dunes where I grew up in Coachella, which is where it gets to be 125 degrees. And you've got to be mean just to survive. And because it's so far, it's just 2 hours outside of LA, but it's in a very punishing desert, you're the only thing out there. So your artistic scene is going to have a small pond, but sensation of big world element to it. You also have every rocker in the world and every famous person rubbing elbows with it. I mean, Chris Goss used to come out there and hang out. Black Sabbath had a riot there at his shows. The last place in America Jimi Hendrix was before he died was in the city of Coachella. I mean, it has a long-term history. And the very first person, the beginner of the generator party was Eric Burton and Jimi Hendrix. They're the first persons who took portable generators out into the desert to perform shows. And we did it because it was a retirement community by the time we were born, and nobody liked kids. Kids were the last thing anybody wanted. So the only thing we could do to have a social environment was to take it away from where anybody could touch us and do it on our own. And that simple fact of having to do everything on our own, create the venue, do the promotion, have the gear, support the artist, care about it, all of it was us, and it gave us unique experiences. I hope that wasn't too of a long answer, but I was trying to answer. It's an important question.
No, it was perfect. I mean, you're giving me chills. I'm just I mean, the past 14, 15 years, you know, the questions, you know, about Joshua Tree, about yourself, about Queens of the Stone Age, about, you know, this studio called Rancho de la Luna. You know, it's just like, you know, it's like, who really did shoot Kennedy? You know, that type of stuff just in my head all the time. One question that sticks.
I can tell you who really shot Kennedy if you want to know.
I imagine you do. I guess that would. Yeah, I mean, yeah. What is your take on that? What do you think about the film? Did you feel that Oliver Stone made it justice, or what's your take on it?
No, Oliver Stone's a fucking a misanthropic, narcissistic fop and a dipshit, and he's also a liar and a stealer of stolen valor. He is. It turns out he lied about his military service. But quite frankly, he created a few distortions that have affected. He wanted to sell movies. They wanted to make money. And the money was being made predicated on the belief that our government may have assassinated our president. And it generated billions and billions of dollars. But the reality of life is that sometimes the reality isn't as sexy as it is in the movies. And in fact, whenever we see a movie where they show the real story and then they make a Hollywood movie about the person's movie, like in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, they get James Brolin to play Pee-wee instead of Pee-wee. You know what I mean? It's like there's an element of churching it up. And that unfortunately occurred. And also you can be the victim of what's called a conspiracy of unintended circumstances. At the time Kennedy was shot, it was a different world. And the information flowed differently. And what to get to the point, quite frankly, what I believe happened and what was very roundly proven to be happening. But this book that was written by one of the original forensic analysts came out at the same time as JFK, and nobody really wanted, if the belief that the government may have killed Kennedy was removed, you wouldn't have a big hit in a movie like Kennedy. So what really happened, in my opinion, is that Oswald got off a lucky shot. That's the shot that hit him in the throat and also hit the governor. And then when the car came to a stop, the inexperienced William Hickey, who was normally the driver of the follow-up car, and he had been moved to long-arm duty for the first time. He'd never handled an M16. I think once the car stopped, he got out his firearm, flipped off the safety. He was in the process of acquiring his target, which was over his right shoulder. And when he did that, the car lunged forward. And when that happened, he fired off a round accidentally. And that's the round that hit Kennedy in the head. If you ever watched the Zapruder film, do you not find it odd that his body moves the way it moves and explodes the way it explodes? And then Mrs. Kennedy goes to the back of the car to retrieve the piece of his head. Now, I never understood that until I was in Paris. And when I was in Paris, during all of that awful carnage that was taking place, I did gain some perspective on things. And after seeing a friend of mine shot in the head, I was mesmerized at first, and then I learned something. The bullet it hit her in the head, and her head moved in the direction of the bullet for a fraction of a second. And then it was like a magic hand grabbed her head in the middle of and threw it back towards the shooter. And everything flew out in the direction back out towards the shooter as well. And that did not make any fucking sense to me. And it fucked with me. I thought it almost threatened to fuck with my mental integrity because I was questioning. I thought I was going into a state of hallucination. So I had to ask the police officers right away what I saw. And they explained to me quite simply what happens. When the bullet hits the head, for example, it pushes on the head for a fraction of a second, but it's traveling at such a great speed and velocity that within a fraction of a second, it's pushing off the inside of your head. It's literally pushing off. So it pushed the head, the body, if we're talking about head, will go in the direction of the round for a moment. And then it'll be violently thrown back in the direction that the bullet came from as the bullet exits. And that's how I know that the shooter of Kennedy was behind him, directly behind him, because that's where Mrs. Kennedy goes to get the piece of his head. And I, with my own eyes, saw a person's head explode in such a way that a great piece of their head was thrown almost at the gunman by the sheer force of the round. Once I understood the unique physics, and the physics are unique, things can create optical illusions, and this happens all the time. So once I actually physically understood the physics of firearm penetration, I understood the Kennedy shooting much differently. And when I combine that with the flaw and accident, the graphic that they show all the time in JFK of the limo, and it's the top view, and it's those circle drawings, and you see the president, and that's distorted. That particular car was called a stadium vehicle, and it was designed and created expressly for parades and for dignitaries, meaning that JFK and his wife were seated on a seat that was wider and higher, graduated like a stadium. And it's done this way so that photographers on the ground can get all parties in frame. The Kennedys would sit above and further out than the governor and his wife. They were seated closer in together and lower. And when the first round went off and the governor turns to look where he's shooting and he puts his hand on the outside of the car, that round lines up perfectly with his wrist and his leg and the fact that it traveled through his body. It makes absolute sense. It makes all witnesses reconciled. It makes all the fact that gunpowder was smelled, the manner in which it was, it makes all the sense. Yes, there was a conspiracy, most assuredly, and it did start with the Secret Service because they were trying to keep their fucking job. At the height of the Cold War, do you really think when you have a politician like Nixon refusing a recount that he would have won just so we didn't look weak in front of the Russians, that we could have the Secret Service accidentally shooting their own guy? No. And I also learned something else. The pristine bullet. A girlfriend of mine mine in Paris, I was helping her flee the venue as we were leaving. And she was limping, and we had to sit on the sidewalk once we got clear of the venue. And I pulled off her shoe, and a perfect, pristine round it had traveled through a couple of people and hit her leg, lost its force, and it pushed itself out, and I pulled it out. Not a dent or a scratch in that round, because it wasn't a fragmenting round. So the rounds that Oswald was shooting, and you have to consider that this sicko had been looking at this perch every day, fantasizing about killing someone. He was a psycho. And the third round that people say proves that he fired 3 shots. I'm a gun owner. I keep a breech round in my chamber, meaning I keep a spent shell that's already been fired. I keep it in the gun to keep moisture out of the firing mechanism. I believe that when Oswald knew that the president was coming, he got excited. He ejected his breech round. That's why that empty shell was found further away than the others. He got to his perch. He fired off. He got off a lucky shot and a ricochet, and in the excitement, an inexperienced person who had been placed on the duty to hold the M16 because Kennedy's Secret Service detail were known to be party animals, phenomenal party animals. They kept up with him. They were doing lots of speed. They had been partying all night long in Jack Ruby's bar the night before. They were wasted, and they put the driver on duty. The only change the Secret Service made to close contact details is no more long rifles. They were the ones that were trying to keep their job. They were the ones that ordered the body to be moved. They were the ones exclusively, no one else, that ordered all the initial weird things. And then you have to consider how governments work, just people. Height of a Cold War. Once it looked weird from the start, nobody wanted to touch it. So by the time it got to the Senate and the Congress, it looked like a fucked up, damn god-awful shit-fire mess of a myriad of conspiracies, bureaucratic shit. And, of course, people hated Kennedy. He was responsible for the Bay of Pigs, and a lot of soldiers felt that he had sold them out. So nobody was in a hurry to give a fuck about him. So it all just looks bad when suddenly you have a rock star of a president who dies, terrible president, but very popular, who dies, and everyone wants answers. In an age before computers, you have vast amounts of information being collated, and people wanted it over so we wouldn't look weak in front of the Russians. And that's exactly what happened. That makes sense. It's not sexy. But if people really believed that their government at that time in America had assassinated its own president, they would have been in the streets with fucking guns, not in the movie theaters with fucking conspiracy theories.
Dang, that's wild, man. I've never heard that. That you gave me clarification on on just so much there.
There's a documentary that was made. It's available. It's called In the Line. It might be called In the Line of Fire. I'll look it up before we get off the phone. It was produced by an Australian production company, and the world's foremost successful detective in the history of Interpol, an Australian detective. He's the one that investigates it. He runs a serious, full forensic investigation, and he bases it all on this book written by the original forensic analyst of the life of the Warren report. And he proves it. He shows the things that had been forgotten about, little details that have been. And people will ask me, why did Ruby? I'll tell you why Ruby did it. Because he knew that just like any gangster, he knew they were eventually going to come to his ass. Because that's where all the bad shit was coming. So in his fucking fucked up, speed-addled, drugged out fucking mind, he thought, if I kill this guy, there's no way they're going to fucking hold me in jail. Because he'd already seen it done in a couple of lesser cases. You know, it's normally very simple. The world's greatest naval armada ever amassed, 5,000 ships, was because one dude's girlfriend named Helen went to a city called Troy. Very simple.
No joke, man. Wow. I have to look that up. I'm researching that right now in the Line of Fire. I never did it. It's interesting. I never actually dug into it that much to get a little bit more insight into what happened. But
once I was so skeptical, and this film is so beautifully delivered. It's no bullshit. It's straightforward. It presents a synopsis and a theory, and then it backs up its theory point by point meticulously, and not with like things that you have have to believe in fucking hokum men with fucking ice bullets. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy to theorize and connect dots, but the world is simply dots. And sometimes they're the connections of God, and sometimes it's impossible to know which dots need to be connected. But when you're trying to connect the dots, you probably will. It doesn't mean you've correctly done it.
Yeah. And let me ask you something too, Boots. So, totally, if you don't feel comfortable answering, or just because based on what you've already kind of alluded to, but
I'm not comfortable talking about anything from Paris. So just know that in advance. So whatever questions you got, let it roll, brother.
Right on. I appreciate that. It makes sense of that. But I know you mentioned, obviously, you've unfortunately seen a close friend of yours pass away in front of you. And can you give us kind of a little overview of how, like, that experience? Obviously, it's impactful. Obviously, it's gonna influence how a person sees life, how a person moves forward from it. What implications did that event that the Bataclan have for you, your bandmates, moving forward, and how has it?
I'm going to tell you, I'm really impressed. These are really excellent questions, dude, and it's very refreshing to be in an interview where you feel like there's an intelligence present, and at least in a pursuit of it. So thank you for that. Off topic, the movie's actually called JFK, The Smoking Gun. Malcolm McDonald is the person that you would look to.
The Smoking Gun.
Smoking Gun.
JFK, The Smoking Gun. And Colin McLaren is the name of the detective that hosts it.
Colin McLaren. Hell yeah.
But to answer your question, that's not an easy question to answer. Of course not, because it's got it's derived from an experience that's incredibly uncommon. But I guess to sum it up, you know, I will say, obviously, because I was there for a few minutes, I was in there for almost an hour looking for my girlfriend, and I was one of the only people that didn't play dead, so I probably saw a little bit more, and I pay attention. But yeah, there was some of the most horrific things I've ever seen in my life, truly. And I can endlessly discuss and debate the shortcomings or the failings, but this is what I saw. And the truth of it is, if I'm going to be honest, is that whatever the worst efforts of the evil fucks, the animals that ambushed us and bushwhacked us the way they did, whatever their intention was, I am here to tell you it failed miserably. The only thing you really gain from anything like that is perspective. And some great wisdom was put to the test. Really, you have to make a choice when you come through something like that. You have to make a choice real quick. You don't have much time. You have to choose how you're going to proceed forward and how you view what happened. And I'm not a victim. I don't see it as a victimization that I live. You know what I mean? So, and I refuse to let the bad guys win. And also, I really wanted to do right. I knew that I would naturally be the, I don't know, for lack of a better term, representative or spokesperson for whatever the phenomenon that would arise from this event would be. I knew it would be me. I didn't want it, but I knew it was going to be me. So my first goal was I made a pledge. I swore an oath that I would never lie. I would be as honest as I could possibly be, and that I would pursue the course to most directly take myself and anyone watching or following to the quickest path of real healing, of real being returned to whole. I would never want anyone to learn to live with victimization. You don't live with cancer, you cut it out. So that was my first thing. And my approach to that was to first really face down what happened and really, really try to separate out the horror and the grievous psychological, spiritual, and physical injury that took place, and try to see what really happened. And when I did that, I began to remember that over the course of that night, on 3 separate occasions, because when everyone played dead, these animals were walking around. Some of them had a bayonet. They were playing a game where they would stick somebody or throw something at somebody, and if they moved, they'd go, "Gotcha!" Boom, boom, shoot them. And these 2 dudes had gotten close to a group of people that were playing dead, and they stuck somebody, and as they were pulling back to shoot this person, apparently this person was very important to someone else, and that someone else jumped with, and I mean, I'm trying to describe this, and it's taking me longer to tell you what happened than it actually took to take place. And, you know, at first, when I'm first witnessing this unfold, I was in a state of horror, in a state like I can't explain to you, because watching someone get killed is one thing, you know, watching someone die in an accident, car accident is tragic, but when you're watching lamb and innocents being hunted and executed summarily and there's nothing you can do about it, it's got a unique punch to it, you know? So that could have been what stayed with me, you know? I could have been forever twisted up in the horror of watching an innocent die without any ability to defend themselves, but I had to remember and keep remembering, and when they were about to kill this person, another person jumped up and went, ah! Ah! And started to run. Look at me! In other words, they were willing, without any thought, in a fraction of a second, to jump up, and there was no delusion under any circumstances by anybody that would make a move like that it was going to lead to anything other than death. They knew that they were running face first into death, and they did it without hesitation, without a thought, without even trembling, without crying, with an angry, warrior-like, holy, and incredibly beautiful, perfect anger, and of course the dude turned on him, boom, boom, shot him, but the person that they gave their life for lived. And I saw this play out 2 more times. The last person I saw, they jumped up and they started to run in one direction, and you could almost, they thought better of it. I don't know what happened in their head, but they knew they were going to die, and they realized in a moment that this was all they had left, and they were going to make the best of it. And I could see that this is what they were doing. And in a way, there was almost a silent announcement. Look at me, behold me, and what I'm about to do. And he ran straight in at that motherfucker going, ah! Now, this is my experience. I don't expect anyone else to believe this, but when this was happening, especially on the last individual who gave their life, I don't give a fuck what anyone said. They became illuminated. And I don't mean like a light shone on them from above. I mean like a holy glow was taking place from inside of them. And I believe in my heart that what I was witnessing was the Lord. And when I say the Lord, I mean our God. And he was attending to these holy warriors who were doing something that the Bible says is the greatest love that a person can have, is that they give their life for their friends. And I was bearing witness to the greatest love that a person can have, that's absolute and that cannot be denied. And I was bearing witness to it happening without question, without a moment's thought, repeatedly. And when I consider just these 3 things alone, and I can separate these out and consider them alone, I have to come to the inevitable conclusion that based on this, the world is a beautiful place. The world is a beautiful place, and it's filled with love, and it's filled with a love so holy that when a person is in the midst of demonstrating it, God himself will send his angels to attend to them, so much so that they glow as they are fucking charging into glory. And I was lucky enough to bear witness to this. I was privileged enough to be present and to be aware and to have been lucky enough to have my wits about me. Now, would I have chosen this if I could have? Fuck no. I wish I'd never ever seen any of this shit ever, man. But that has nothing to do with it. I was there. I did see it. And it is true what I saw. The greatest love that anybody can express, delivered without hesitation at a rock show, the last place you would expect it. And so, that makes me have to say, whatever those evil fucks did is not more important. Any of the carnage, and believe me, it is bestial what these fucking monsters did, dude. And some of the shit that nobody knows about is beyond subhuman monstrosity. It is absolute. But in spite of their best or their worst, it will never be as big as a fraction of what one of these persons accomplished by giving their life for their friends. And that's just 3 little moments. Not to mention that the world united behind us like I've never seen. And France, the people of France united behind us. People have surrounded me in a way that I can't describe because I have no frame of reference, you know? And it's so beautiful and it's so pure what I have witnessed internationally, what I have been the lucky motherfucker to be the benefactor of a focused form of love that is unique in the world. I was the benefit. I benefited from it, and because this is true, I'm able to see this grand thing happen, and because my mom raised me, thankfully, to be able to see the spiritual world, to be able to see the right and wrong of a thing, even if it's popular or not. To be able to see this, I was able to see, and therefore I'm left more, you know, the burden. I don't have any trouble sleeping at night, and it is exactly because of what I'm talking about. I don't have nightmares. I'm not afraid of my fellow brothers and sisters. I have Arab, Muslim friends. I'm not afraid. I proved that by going right back to where they planned this shit, and I've toured almost 400 shows in the 6 years since that's happened. I kept our band touring, so I kept us moving. I fear nothing like that. But what I learned from this is that beauty can be terrible, and things that are holy and things that are absolutely perfect can be terrible, and they can be so beautiful that it's almost impossible to take, and that I have benefited from something so intense and so beautiful and pure that my only burden really is just making sure that I'm able to say that I deserve it and that I'm worthy of it, because it's difficult to even try to negotiate an understanding that you could possibly deserve this, because what I have benefited from and what I've received is far beyond the pale of what anybody should ever expect. I am the luckiest motherfucker on the face of this earth, and rock and roll has saved my life, and I have come to know the greatest friends I will ever have and the greatest people I will ever know, and people that I'm with right now as we speak, that I am prouder than anything to even know them and have them as my friend. And I have learned that there are some things worse than dying, dude, you know, and to live like a coward, to live like someone who made the wrong choice, to have lived like a person who wasn't willing to jump up and give their life for those that they love. That's not the world I want to live in, and it's a precious world, and you have to protect it, you know? And so when we come to it all said and done, I'm able to come to the end of this, and I'm able to carry some of the heaviest shit I've ever carried in my life. And I'm not saying that I don't see ghosts, so to speak. I know all of our fans. I love what I do. This is the luckiest job I've ever had, and I've always known it. So the people that make it possible are everything to me, and they always have been. And I spend a lot of time with them, and in France in particular, the fans there I have a special bond with. And in particular, Paris. You know, I'm a Southern boy, and when I got to bring my mom to Paris for the first time, it's a big deal. Every hillbilly boy wants to bring his mom to Europe. It's like, you know what I mean? And so I kind of let it be known that this was the deal. And when we got to Paris, about 30 fans had gotten together with their parents, and they had made all these French pastries and all these. And my point is, they had made it probably one of the greatest things that my mother's ever done in her life. And when that flight home from that tour was the best moment I've ever had in my life, you know, I got to give my mom something that you don't normally get to do, and it was extra. The specialness of it was so intense because of the selfless, kind act few very dedicated and industrious fans. And so I love these kids, especially. And a lot of the kids that night, I walked them into the show. You know, there's a band that had just finished recording their record that night. And as I was walking into the gate, they stopped me, and I was kind of late, but I was like, what's up? And they're like, dude, we just recorded our record. We just wanted to say how much we look up to you. And I was like, really? Well, fucking follow me in. And I brought them in, and I sat them up front. And, you know, only two of them walked out. And the main dudes, the dude that had written the record, none of them made it out, you know? And I could kill myself by thinking, is it because I brought them up there? You know, but that's not the way it works. That's not true. And you have to resist those temptations. I feel no guilt in that sense. But the guilt that I might feel if I didn't learn the lessons that I should have learned, if I misled any of my brothers and sisters following that, if I ever allowed myself to be manipulated or to give over just to greed or anything, any of the pressures that have constantly haunted me and afflicted me since that shit went down, if I ever gave into it, that would be worse than dying. It would be worse to sell out your brothers and sisters, you know? So, ironically, ultimately, the only thing that it's done is make me aware of the fact that I have the luckiest life in the world, that I'm surrounded by the beautiful people that really are, and that the world is a beautiful place, and that it's worth fighting for, and that new normal is not anything anybody should be willing to let happen.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. And this quote resonates with me, and as you're talking about that, this quote I read before in a movie, and then I looked it up, but it's by Joseph Campbell. He's an American literature professor. But the quote was, "All the gods, all the heavens, all the hells are within you." And based off what you said, I mean, people are capable of beautiful things. People are capable of horrible things at the same time. But thank you for sharing that experience and that insight.
I feel like I have an obligation to share it with artists, especially. People need to know what happened there. I mean, and then there's, you know, of course, there's even endless other necessary discussions that need to happen, like for security purposes, et cetera. Knowing your environment, being aware, situational awareness, and trusting your instincts. There's a lot of lessons, you know. I mean, there's also greater world political lessons, like almost nothing about the official story is actually true. And I've garnered a lot of controversy for speaking to what I consider to be the truth. And if not for the fact that my mom raised me to not give a rat's ass what an asshole thinks, I want a vile cocksucker to hit me. I'm on an ice death list, and that's fucking awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if anything, that's why, like, I wanted to have you on our podcast. Is you're like, you're one of the few people that have got a platform, and you know, like, you know, the way you feel is the way you feel, and I think that's what it's all about. Just being true about what exactly you feel and what you think. And I mean, if anything, that's why. I mean, that's why I look up to you. I mean, because you are, you know, you're very outspoken, and
it was not easy, brother. Like, the pressure on me once Paris happened, the people that came out of the woodwork, even my own friends, the things, it was trying to make it easy for me, you know, to be angry, to hate Muslims. There was a whole bunch of pressure just to do that, because then I would have gotten a platform, and, you know, the money that was made. I mean, all these things are so difficult, but not as difficult as you think it is if you simply stay focused on a couple of very simple things. I want to do the right thing. I want to. I don't want to let my friends down. I really don't. Especially since no one let me down. People that didn't even know me didn't let me down. I mean, the only reason that I'm able to even be on this phone, the only reason I was able to tour, because believe me, motherfucker, I wanted to quit. When I came home, I was decided it was done. I was never going to get on stage again. Not because I was afraid of playing, but because I was afraid of ever being the cheese again in a fucking trap, which is one of the hardest things for me, that I was the cheese in a trap against my friends. It's a hard one for me. So I didn't want to play or do fucking anything, man. And I had to overcome that little by little, but the decision to do it was all at once. You know, you decide you're going to get up and walk. before you actually can. And that's the first step that I had to make. And it wasn't easy. There was pressure. But count your blessings. I was blessed to have one fucking hell of a great mom. And thank God she raised me in certain ways, because if I hadn't had those skills, I might have been weaker at certain points, and I might have sold out my friends, and that I wouldn't be able to live with, because it's worse than dying, man. And I believe in God. I know that this is not the end. I know that as sure as I'm talking to you on the phone, we are going to stand before God, and He will judge us. And He is not going to give a fuck if it was easy, if it was expedient to my career, if it was going to cause me to lose followers on Instagram. He doesn't care about that. He's only going to ask you, what did you do there? What did you do when it mattered? What did you do when it was important? I don't give a fuck about how hard it is. And there's just some shit I'd rather not stand before God and have to say, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, just just listening to you and talking, it's like I mean, it's just fucking, I mean it's like a dream right now, just hearing you talk and stuff, and at the same time, you know, it's what you're producing is very, very special to the people that follow you. I mean, be it that somebody stops following you on Instagram or whatever, you are reaching people. So, I mean,
thank you, man. It
no
means
problem.
a lot to me. Thank you very much.
John?
Yeah, gotcha. No, yeah, I appreciate that. That's something else, man. It's interesting as we're doing this podcast. We're trying to really make these conversations genuine and really get that insight from the individuals we're speaking to. This really, man, is very powerful, man. Thanks for sharing that. And it's, I think moving forward, I mean, and even for our listeners that we're going to share this with, it's definitely going to have those ripple effects based on your experience. And,
now, on a positive note, I've taken all that, and I've just recorded a Christmas album that we're releasing this Christmas of 6 traditional, as serious and as sincere as a heart attack, the most Christian of Christian Christmas songs that you can find, and sang with absolute sincerity, to be delivered by this fucking, dope fiended rock and roll monstrosity that I am. It just goes to show that we're all worthless, and God's gonna give us all a break.
That's awesome. And what's the album, or when can you expect to release? Do you want to give a little information over that? So we can put it out there.
Hold on one second. Let me just look that up, because I have all that right here. Cool. Just got the artwork. I was going to call it Human Centipede, and I had artwork made that was an ass-to-mouth chain of Santas, multicultural, of course, but that was frowned upon as controversial. It's going to be called Eagles of Death Metal Presents A Boots Electric Christmas.
Oh, nice.
And that's good.
And I want the tagline to be, Santa's not going to be the only thing coming down your chimney this Christmas.
that'll plug it. Hell yeah.
And now, I'm smoking a big, beautiful blunt and lighting a brand.
Oh, that's perfect. And where are you at right now?
I'm at my house in Atwater Village with two of my dearest and most best friends. We're smoking weed, and I'm about to sing karaoke. That's been something. Being able to sing karaoke every day for people has been a way to interact without overly being involved in the politics, but being able to assist in a way that, I'm an entertainer. When everyone's down, let me shake my dick and entertain.
and then I'll pass it over to my brother right now to wrap it up, just to be mindful of time. But do you mind if we send you some gear, just a little thank you, just in regards to talking with us this afternoon?
I will expect it. And what's the show called again?
It's Somewhere Out There Podcast.
Out There Podcast?
Somewhere Out There Podcast, yes.
Somewhere Out There podcast.
Yes.
So, are you recording me right now?
Yes.
Yeah, we have the phone call, and then we're going to be posting it up, and then we can we'll shoot you a message too, just so you can check it out.
Yeah. Would it also be possible to get a picture of yourself?
Of course. But make sure you record what I'm about to say right now. Here we go.
Absolutely, yes.
3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. This is Boots Electric, and you're listening to Somewhere Out There podcast.
Awesome.
The only podcast worth listening to.
Hell yeah, man.
Hell yeah.
Appreciate that, Boots. That's awesome, man.
Boots,
I'll report you a couple more station IDs, too. You guys, I want to say, I don't know what your experience level is or what, but whatever you're attempting to do, you're doing amazing at it, because this is an incredibly professional, high level. The questions you guys ask me, believe me, I do a million interviews. I talk to people all the time. It's part of my job, and I know really quick, right out of the gate, if the person has put thought into these questions, if they're going to be the types of questions I hear all the time. I might enjoy it, but I knew immediately that you guys were serious and that there was a sincerity and an honesty, because your questions immediately were thoughtful, intelligent, and well constructed. So I don't know if you wanted that sort of report card, but as a former journalist and someone who does this professionally, I really enjoyed this, and I think you guys are onto something.
I appreciate that. We appreciate that. It's been a lifelong dream to talk to you, and it's just like all the stories that we've heard before, and the generator stories and how you guys have been at the forefront of this. It's just like talking to for me it's like talking to Hendrix. Like, hey, so growing up in Seattle, that type of feeling. You were when we did start this, you were one of the first that we wanted to get into contact with. It was around the time after you had came around here. So I mean, we're just really grateful that you were able to come on, and you were gracious enough to let us know what you to talk and conversate. It wasn't like a conversation where we had to drag the words out or anything. But yeah,
I was immediately comfortable with you guys. Let me tell you something. The reason why I'm here is because I should be here. Know that you're generating something that's worth it, and recognize that. It's okay to recognize when you're badass. That's cool. I mean, fuck. I've got a mirror. I know what it's like to be me. It's pretty fucking awesome, dude. I get it, dude. Believe me. So, you guys are badass, and just as a little insight into what I mean by that, when I get off the phone with you guys, one of the first things I do when I talk to my best friend Joshua Homme, for example, is to tell him that I really think that this is something he should come on, because he, like me, we love intelligence, and we really seek out intelligent dialogue. We don't even have to agree with the topic of what's being said. We don't have to agree with the conclusion that's drawn necessarily. All we want is intelligent and honest and sincerely pursued. And so keep it up, and I promise you guys will go far.
We appreciate that, and I'm gonna keep you in my phone if that's cool, and to text you every once in a.
Take my address, because I want to. If you guys have any of your stuff, I want to wear a shirt or something. So take my address.
Yeah, man.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get some swag to you, man. But yeah, do you have your address available? We'll jot it down. We can expect that within a couple of weeks. We'll send it out to you.
Awesome. So on Boots Electric, my address is 3960 Brunswick Avenue, Los Angeles, California, 90039. I wear a small shirt, and I wear a 32 waist, just in case.
Nice. And Boots, real quick, when you're around here, I mean, we're
Brother, check this out. I give you my word. The next time I roll through town, we are going to hang out. In fact, let's do something. I mean, fuck. The only... You can't be 10 feet tall if you start by cutting yourself off at the knees, right? So, I don't believe anything's possible. I believe everything is possible if you think about it correctly. So, let's make a reason to bring a bunch of rockers out there that you want to talk to and fucking have them in one place. I mean, you see what I'm suggesting here?
Absolutely. I mean, just it's all good. I mean, the most important would be just you, because you're you gave us this opportunity, and so that's why I'm just like, if it's just you, it's all right too.
I'm thinking about doing like a like a personal tour of the United States. Is kind of like my idea being a State of the Union. Let's get through the politics. Let's see how we're really doing and how everything that we've been doing is really affecting the music business. And so that's something I'm thinking about, and I might get in touch with you guys. Maybe we can set something up so when I roll through San Antonio, we interview San Antonio live.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah, man. That'd be awesome. Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Boots. I appreciate the time, and I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I'll pass it off to my brother, but thank you again so much again for being gracious and giving us some great insight, and we look forward to connecting. You can expect some stuff from us in the next few weeks, but thank you so much. I'll pass it off to my brother.
Absolutely,
Boots.
Boots.
If you guys ever need help in getting and securing interviews, look, this is what I used to do, and people don't believe it at first, but I love you guys immediately, so I'm an ally and an asset, and I serve our community. You can ask me anything, anytime you want, and I'll tell you the best information I have. I like to see people win, and I immediately want to see you guys accomplish whatever it is you want, and if there's any way that I can help, especially, and I can help, believe me, in getting people to come on your show. So if ever there's a question you have, don't ever, the only time I'll be upset is if I find out you didn't ask me.
No problem. Yeah, you got it. Just knowing that we're friends with you now is, at this point, it's badass.
You are, and I'm your friend too. That's just as badass for me, brother.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you, man.
All right, Boots, we'll let you get to your evening, sir. And once again, Somewhere Out There Podcast thanks you.
Love you guys.
Take care, man.
Take care, man. Later.